Hello, and welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe. My name's Amanda Edmiston. I'm a storyteller based in Scotland, and my background is in herbal medicine. So I really like to share stories about plants and how we use them for food or medicine, and just I like to bring the plants that we share our lives with into all my stories. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories today about one of my favourite plants, the apple tree. We have a saying in the UK: an apple a day keeps the doctor away, because apples are so full of nutrients, vitamins, and minerals, sweet and delicious. My first story I was told by my mum. My mum's also a storyteller, and she in turn was told this story by an old friend of hers, a lovely storyteller who was her mentor called Mary Medlicott. The story starts with an old woman who lived on the very edge of the village. No one remembered her real name, because over the years they'd all started to call her Old Misery. I'm sorry to say that she was a grumpy soul and deserved her rather cruel nickname. She loved her garden more than she loved people, and it was very, very beautiful. The thing she loved about it best, though, was at the very centre was an ancient apple tree. Its wizened bark looked like a face peeking out. It had broad branches that in the spring would suddenly grow as if by magic overnight, soft green leaves, and then a blossom would appear, pink and fragrant. When the blossom drifted to earth, it would be replaced by tiny green apples that, as the summer months rolled by, would start to swell and grow. As autumn arrived with its cold winds, the apples would start to take on a rosy hue, and the old woman would know they would be about ready to pick. She started imagining making delicious sweet crumbles with biscuity topping, scented of cinnamon, glasses of squeezed juice, lovely chutneys, jellies, pies. The ideas of things she could make would dance through her dreams. But every year, the day she decided the apples were nearly ready, she would lie and watch and wait, then fall asleep, not having seen a single thing happen. But in the morning, when she woke up and got her basket to go into the garden to pick the apples she knew would now be ripe, they had gone. Despite staying awake as long as she could and watching to see if anyone came into her garden, someone, it would seem, always did, and steal her apples away. As the years went by and she never got a single one to eat, her mood got worse and worse. Her name, well deserved, Old Misery, never got a single one of those fruits to eat. And every year, although she lay and watched out her cottage window, hoping to catch the thief red-handed, she never did. She got angrier and grumpier about it until hardly anyone spoke to her anymore. Visitors never came to her door, and the children laughed and ran away when they saw her coming into the village. She grew lonelier and sadder, and started to wish that someone, somewhere, would stop and pass the time of day with her. She was thinking along these lines when one day there was unexpectedly a soft knock at the door. When she opened it, there on her stone step stood a stranger. His boots were dusty and worn. He had a wide-brimmed hat pulled down low, shadowing his face. But he was tired, she could tell by the way he stood. He stretched out a hand and asked her if she could give him a glass of water, and she told him to make himself comfy sitting on the bench by her stone step. She fetched him a glass of water and a piece of bread, a small bowl of soup she'd made from the vegetables in her garden, and the pair got talking and passed the time of day for an hour or so. When he'd finished his meal, the traveller got up to leave, and as he went to walk back down the path, he turned to the woman and said, "You have been so kind. They called you Old Misery, but you have given me water and food and helped me on my way. So I would like to grant you a wish in return." Well, the woman laughed. "I don't believe in wishes. What could you give me?" "Just try and ask. One wish." "Oh," she said, "all right. Well, I tell you what I wish more than anything else. See my old apple tree. I wish that I could eat an apple from its branches. I wish I would capture whoever steals my apples every year and make them sorry. I wish that next time that thief clambers into my tree and steals my apples, that the tree would capture it tight in its branches and only let them go when I said they could fall." The traveller nodded and smiled. "Then that wish is yours," he said, and went on his way. Well, summer rolled on. The vegetable harvest came in and autumn started to blow its chill gust through the air. The apples got bigger and juicier and sweeter looking, and the old woman knew that the day would soon come when she could harvest them. She watched and waited in the evenings, hoping to catch the thief before they could steal the crop away. But every night, as before, she fell asleep. When the day came when she knew it would be right to harvest the apples, she got her basket and went to the door. For the first time ever, she saw something incredible. There, trapped in the old gnarled branches, was the baker from along the road. A man whose short crust pastry was said to melt in the mouth. His apple pies were the talk of the town. There he was, his white coat, his floury hands, caught in the gnarled branches of her apple tree, and he begged and he pleaded and he asked to be set free, but she said no. There you'll stay for a day and a night, and maybe a day more, until you promise that you will never, ever steal an apple from me again. The next morning, when she went down, there was a wee boy from next door, caught in the gnarled old branches of her apple tree, and he begged and he pleaded, "Please, missus, let me down. I won't pester you again, I promise." "No," she said, "there'll you stay a day and a night and a day more, until I believe your promise, and I know you'll never steal an apple from me again." And there they stayed. The next day, she started to let the folk down, one by one, but every person that came and stole an apple from her, she made them stay there a day and a night and a day more, until they promised to never steal from her again. Thud, thud, thud. Half a dozen people, maybe more, got dropped from the apple tree's branches and scurried away shamefaced. And I'm happy to say that no one did steal an apple from Old Misery again. Every year, as they ripened and grew juicy and sweet, she picked her own apples and made delicious pies and crumbles, chutneys and jams. And she lived a long and happy life. When she was an old, old woman, she was stood one day in her kitchen when she heard a knock at the door. She opened it wide, and this time there was no traveller, no man with a pulled down hat and dusty boots, but a tall, thin, pale figure, his face hidden by a heavy hood. He stretched out long bony fingers towards her, and he said, "Old woman, come with me for a walk, for I am death." The old woman looked at him and said, "Oh, very nice to meet you. Of course I'll come for a walk. But before we go out, would you do me one favour?" "Well," said Death, "seeing as you've asked so politely, and not run away screaming like so many do, I will grant you a final wish. What would you like?" She said, "I'm so old now, I haven't been able to climb up my apple tree and get one of those lovely juicy ripe apples, and I would love to taste one last time before I come with you." And Death nodded, went down to the apple tree, and he reached up, trying to grab an apple from a branch, but couldn't quite reach. So he clambered up the trunk, bony fingers grabbing the branches, and went to pluck a juicy red apple. And the apple tree branches caught him tight. The old woman left her house, and he begged and he pleaded to be let down. But old Misery just laughed and smiled and said, "No, you're caught in my apple tree, and there you'll stay for a day and a night, and maybe a day more, and maybe a wee bit longer, until you promise me that you'll go away and not chap on my door any more. Don't come back until I call you, and then I'll let you down." And there she made him stay for a day and a night and a day more, and maybe a few more days after that. Eventually, Death himself promised, hand on heart, to go away and leave the old woman alone and not come back till she called him, at which point she let him fall with a thud to the floor. And as far as I know, he's not visited her since. How do I know that? Well, there's still quite a lot of misery in the world. That's my apple tree story. So I've got another story I'd actually really like to tell you as well while you're here. Well, I've got you trapped in the branches of my fictitious storytelling apple tree, ready to listen to one more story. This is a story I tell a lot, and I tell it to people of all ages, from tiny children in kindergarten classes all the way through to old folk in care homes and everyone in between. It's one of my favourite stories to tell, and it's become my own and developed all kind of twists and turns over the years. But originally I adapted it and retold it from a beautiful book called The Apple Pick Princess by a very talented illustrator and writer called Jane Ray. It doesn't start with an apple tree though. This story starts as so many stories do, in a beautiful kingdom. Not so far from here, but not so near, so you know it well. And when my story starts, the kingdom is an amazing place. There are fruit trees as far as the eye can see. Every kind of fruit tree you can imagine. Figs ripening in the sun, exotic oranges against a sun-kissed wall, peaches, apples, pears and plums. And the weather is clement. Soft rain falls from puffy white cumulus clouds. The sun comes out and ripens the fruit, and then more soft rain falls to nourish the roots. And people loved living there. A king ruled the land, and although he'd lost his queen a few years before, he was a fair and happy man, and everyone loved him. But then, one day, something changed. The soft white cumulus clouds were replaced by angry, grey thunderclouds scudding across the sky, making everything dark and gloomy. And then the thunder started to rumble, and the rain lashed the land until where once there had been green grass, now there were just thick puddles of oozing mud. The rain did not stop for 7 long months. Month after month, day after day, the rain fell, saturating the ground, washing all the goodness away. And just when the people thought that the rain would never end, the clouds parted and the sun came out. But this was no ordinary sun. It didn't gently warm the land. It burned and baked until the saturated soil became dust and was blown quite away, leaving the roots exposed and the trees starting to die. The sun shone for 7 long months, and at the end of those 7 months it was replaced by rain for 7 more. The cycle continued year after year until nothing grew anywhere in the land, and the kingdom became poor, and the people were so hungry. The king did not know what to do. He felt like giving up. He tried everything he could to restore health to his land, and he did not know what to try next. He decided to ask his children. So he called his 3 children to him, and he said to them, I will give you 7 days and 7 nights to go and find something to restore the health of our kingdom and make it flourish once more. Well, he promised them that whoever came up with the best idea would be king or queen when the time came, and the 3 children left to go and come up with a brilliant idea to prove their worth to their father. His eldest son, Prince Valdor, went to his bedchamber. Now you might expect suits of armour or baby dragons, amazing libraries of books. But no. All he had in his room was an old, slightly tarnished, rusty crown and a mirror. He looked in the mirror and thought to himself, and then he placed the crown on his head. And he thought, I look powerful. I look important. This crown gives me a brilliant idea. I will build a wall circling our land. It will make us look powerful and strong like my crown does to me. I will then be able to control everybody that goes out and everybody that comes in. They will do what I say. And once I am in control, well then our land will be strong again. He went out and he called his servants to him. He sent them out round every single house in the land and got them to bring back every single thing made of metal. Tools, cutlery, tables, chairs, all kinds of things. They gathered together and they made a huge, shining metal wall around the whole kingdom. Meanwhile, the next child, the Princess Portia, went to her bedchamber. Now, again, no suits of armour, no baby dragons, no libraries of books full of brilliant stories, no works of art, no amazing dresses. All she had in her cupboard were sticky crumbs and, at the back, a very small bag of money and a very long list of all the things she would do with it if she got to be queen. She read the list now. Oh, I know, she said. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to have the biggest party the kingdom has ever seen. Parties make everyone happy, and if everyone's happy, then they will think everything is wonderful, and then I will get to be queen. She sent her servants out across the land and got them to bring back every bag of sugar, every jar of syrup, every flagon of honey, and she got chefs and cooks to make the most amazing feast of sweet treats. She got dancers and musicians to play, and she had the biggest party the kingdom had ever seen. Meanwhile, the youngest princess, Melody, went to her bedchamber, and again there were no suits of armour, no baby dragons, no amazing books full of stories and knowledge. All there was an old tin box. But she loved it. She'd looked at it 1,000 times, maybe more. The picture on the lid reminded her of when the kingdom had flourished and was green and beautiful, and on the outside were written the words, East, West, Home's Best. She looked inside as she had done 1,000 times, hoping that the objects inside would give her an idea of what she could do. There was a ball of citrine that shone and sparkled like the sun, and it was beautiful. She didn't know what to do with it. It was a dusty old bottle, and on it were written the words, a sad song's worth of tears. And it smelt like a meadow on a summer's day. And she loved it, but she didn't know what to do with it. And then there was a heart-shaped box, covered with exotic pictures of flowers and leaves. On the bottom were engraved the words, the winds from the four corners of the world. And it was beautiful, but she didn't know what to do with it. And then finally, there was a ball of wool, as soft as a cloud, the colours of the rainbow. And she held it against her cheek, but she didn't know what to do with it. She looked at the objects, and then something caught her eye, something she'd not seen before. There at the bottom was a tiny fold of paper, and she opened it up, and inside was a single black seed. And she looked at it, but she didn't know what to do with it. That night, she popped the seed in a piece of paper beneath her pillow and went to sleep. As the stars came out and filled the night sky, she had the most beautiful dream about when she'd been a little girl, about how she'd run and played with her mother in the orchard, and how her mother had held her up into the branches of an apple tree and helped her pick a sweet red apple, how she'd cut it in half for her to eat, and shown her the star that's in the middle of every single apple, how she'd told her daughter to make a wish. And then she'd taken the knife and popped the black pip out, wrapped it in paper and put it safe in her pocket whilst Melody went to play. In the morning, when the princess woke up, she knew exactly what she would do. She took the seed and the box, and she ran out beyond the castle walls and out to the dusty land beyond. There, instinctively understanding, she made a hole in the ground and popped the seed inside, covered it up, and watched and waited. But no magic happened. Next, she went to the box, and she took out that ball of citrine that shone like the sun, and holding it up, she let the rays of the sun shine into it and sparkle and fall where the seed lay. And she watched, and she waited, but no magic happened. Next, she thought, plants need water, and taking the bottle marked a dewdrop's worth of rain, a sad song's worth of tears, she let it drop, 1, 2, 3, and fall where the seeds lay. And she watched, and she waited, but no magic happened. Then she took the box. Maybe it was worth a try. She lifted the lid and let the dust fly out. The wind from the four corners of the world, and it smelt so sweet, and it spiraled and fell where the seed lay. And she watched, and she waited, but no magic happened. Finally, she took the rainbow-coloured ball of wool, as soft as a cloud, and she threw it up into the sky, and the 7 colours arced and fell where the seed lay. And she watched, and she waited, but no magic happened. She felt all was lost, and that night, as the sun set, she lay her head down where the seed lay in the ground and fell asleep. That night, as the stars sparkled in the midnight sky, the magic happened. In the morning, Melody was woken up by a sound she'd not heard for years. Looking up, she saw birds flock overhead, landing in the branches of a full-grown apple tree. As she watched, the pink blossom fell to the floor and tiny green apples started to ripen. There in the tree's branches was a little boy laughing, and together the pair of them came up with a plan. They went to the house of every child in the whole kingdom, and they got them to bring back anything that had a seed in it. A pine cone saved from a party a long time ago. Fenugreek from the back of a spice cupboard. Linseeds kept in a gardener's shed. Nutmeg, acorns, a conker that no one had put a string through. An orange picked for breakfast, an olive picked from lunch. Every child brought a seed, and they went round making a tiny hole in the soil and dropping them in one by one. And then the princess went round, letting the sparkle of sunshine twinkle on the ground. A few drops of water fall. The wind from the 4 corners of the world, and the 7 colours of a magic rainbow. At the end of 7 days and 7 nights, the king left his chamber to see what his children had done. He found the Prince Valdor surrounded by angry people, shaking their fists, demanding that he give them back all their belongings, their tools. How were they to work? How were they to do anything? The king looked at the wall as his son spluttered and muttered what his intentions had been. How is anyone to get in or leave when you haven't made a door? Said the king. You silly boy. Power and control are not the way forward. And off he walked, shaking his head, as the servants gave everyone back their stuff. Next he found his middle daughter. You remember the Princess Portia? Parties are great, but 7 days and 7 nights? The dancers had taken their shoes off and were absolutely worn out. The musicians had run out of puff. The cakes and sweet treats had dissolved into piles of crumbs or been eaten. And in the middle of it all was the Princess Portia. The king shook his head and woke up his daughter and got her to clear up all the mess, and then went off to see if he could find the Princess Melody. He looked for her high and low in the castle, but couldn't find her anywhere, until a small boy shook his sleeve. "Your Majesty," he said, and beckoned the king outside. He led him out beyond the castle walls, and the most incredible sight met his eyes. As far as the eye could see were beautiful plants, green and vibrant, growing, and in amongst the branches of the trees were children eating ripe fruit, laughing and playing, and birds singing beautifully. I think I know who the king got to be queen when he decided to hand over the kingdom. Don't you? Hopefully you've enjoyed my stories today, and I'm going to now sit and eat this apple. Thank you all very much for joining me, and maybe next time you have an apple, if you have an apple to hand, you can cut it in half that way through and find the star that's in the heart of every single one. Thank you all so much for listening, and goodbye. See you soon.
Did you enjoy that storyteller? Of course you did. And if you enjoyed it, like the minstrels of old, we're passing round the hat. And if you have some, whether it's paper or coin, our storytellers would appreciate what you put in. Every penny you put in goes directly to that storyteller through paper. All you have to do is go to worldstorytellingcafe.com, click on today's stories or click on that storyteller, and there'll be a hat below the story, and you can just drop a little in that hat. Well, thank you for listening. And if you can afford it, we'd appreciate it.